We're going to rise to the top. And once we get to the top, I believe we're going to stay at the top.
Hey, Large Kofi here, and before we get into today's video, I just want to encourage everybody who's been returning to my channel, who's not subscribed, to definitely hit that subscribe button, especially if you like the content. I'd definitely love to get monetized by the end of the year, and I think we can definitely do that. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, it means a lot to the channel. Now on to today's video. He's all hype, he's not aesthetic, his waist is too blocky, his veins look awful, he will get exposed. These were all sentiments shared by members of the bodybuilding community before young rising star Nick Walker stepped on stage at the 2021 New York Pro. Before he stepped on stage. The way people felt about him afterwards, though, changed drastically. See, before the New York Pro, Nick had been building a name for himself in the industry as an amateur. He walked around with an amount of mass that a lot of pros weren't walking around with. He was also a relatively young guy. When you saw Nick as an amateur, you noticed that the dude had beef, sirloin, I mean serious mass. He was arguably the biggest amateur in the NPC at the time, and it was pretty clear that he was going pro. It was just a matter of time. So when he did go pro, anybody with eyes could see why. I mean, Nick Walker winning his pro card was one of the most unsurprising events to happen in bodybuilding that year. Like, I can't even imagine any of his competition backstage looking at him thinking for 1 second, yeah, I think I got him. Yeah, no. It was over before it even started, and the anticipation for what he would do at his first pro show was massive. Everyone in the community, including myself, was excited to see how he would stack up with the pros. At this point in his career, the hype around Nick Walker was growing immensely. One of the reasons being how well developed his muscle was for his age. There just weren't a lot of guys in their 20s who had that amount of potential at the time. So when he made his debut at the 2020 Chicago Pro and took 4th, a lot of people saw that as an accomplishment, given who he was competing against. Now, of course, you had some armchair coaches who wanted to throw shade, but regardless of how you felt about Nick, if you were an objective person, you could see that the ceiling was way too high to not get excited. Not to mention, Nick had a lot of room to improve from Chicago. His conditioning could have been a bit tighter, his midsection control could have been a bit better as well, and so could his posing. Criticisms which Nick took to heart. So he got to work and started grinding, and let everyone see that process, because Nick was on top of his game in terms of physique updates. No, his lighting wasn't always great, the updates weren't overdone, they were just simple and highlighted exactly what we wanted to see from him. You couldn't look at Nick's physique updates and not notice how much bigger he was going to be, how well his conditioning was coming together. He was already a much improved bodybuilder even before he stepped on stage again. But despite these improvements, it was a bit difficult to gauge where Nick would place at the New York Pro. Given the fact that he didn't have any glaze on, he hadn't really done any of his show day protocols. What he would look like on stage would be completely different, and we knew that. What we also knew was that he had a great chance of placing top 5 at the New York Pro. But first place? Not many saw that coming. Nick Walker's 2021 New York Pro package wasn't just great, it was miles better than Chicago, shockingly better. The moment he stepped out on stage and prejudging, he captivated not just the entire audience, but everyone who was watching the live stream at home.
Prejudging just wrapped up, and I gotta say, the story of this show has got to be Nick Walker. Based on what I've seen so far from prejudging, Nick Walker nailed it. This is the best version of Nick Walker we've ever seen.
He was bigger, his conditioning was crispier, he was drier, and his mandatory poses had vastly improved. Oh, and that midsection was tight. I mean, that was one of his biggest criticisms heading into that show. But Nick was able to maintain the tightness in his midsection very well, making his physique look a lot more aesthetic than his previous showing. It also accentuated the overall mass in his upper body. Every hater who was convinced that Nick Walker was all hype would be left in shambles. Yeah, because he was dominant at the 2021 New York Pro. And I would argue that it wasn't all that close between him and Justin Rodriguez, who finished second. Nick was 26 when he won this show, which made him the first New York Pro champion under 30 years old since Big Ramy in 2013 when he was 29. Being as young as he was and winning such a marquee show, his second time stepping on an IFBB stage, is every bodybuilder's wet dream. But it was a feat that very few were gifted enough to experience in reality. There was a reason why Nick got the nickname the Mutant, because simply put, he was probably created in the lab. When you take a look at Nick's progression in terms of muscular growth, he's progressed far faster than what most bodybuilders are genetically capable of. You see, most modern open bodybuilders today hit their peak around 33 to 40, mainly because of how long it takes most competitors to develop the muscle maturity to actually be competitive at the highest level. That can be a decade-long process for some guys. Then you have freaks like Nick who are so precocious that they become competitive right away. And when we talk about guys with these types of genetics, I think of Keon Pearson and Ramon Dino. But unlike these guys, in my opinion, Nick has the clearest path at winning the O someday and becoming the Sandow's next gatekeeper. He's likable, he's got a physique to back up the expectations, and he also creates great content for the fans and stays engaged with them. Overall, he has a very bright future in the sport. And when we look at the overall history of Olympia champions, we notice that there's just not a lot of parity. Every generation has a guy who just takes over and dominates for the most part. Yeah, you have some winners here and there who win a couple years, but when we talk about guys who dominate an entire generation, Nick can be that guy. And that's not taking anything away from Big Ramy, because I could be completely wrong and Ramy dominates for another 5 years, but I think the trajectory that Nick is on, he may win an Olympia sooner than later. And if he does, I don't think he's winning just one. When we talk about the crowning of a new Olympia champion, the physique isn't the only quality that the judges are going to take into account. I know, it sounds crazy, but from a political and business perspective, the judges have their eyes on the guys who can make the IFBB more profitable and more attractive to the fans. And Nick, to me, does embody that. One of the things that made that New York Pro showing so special was that he brought a level of conditioning that we just don't see often. A level of conditioning that was honestly jaw-dropping and would set the standard for everybody else in the open basically for the entire year. I mean, once he won, the entire bodybuilding industry was set ablaze, and nobody, and I mean nobody, could use the words hype and Nick Walker in the same sentence anymore. Now, one more thing that I have to mention before I end this video was Nick's beef with Blessing Awodubu going into this show. Blessing won at Nick on Instagram, which kind of started this back and forth heading into the New York Pro about who would place better, who would do better. It definitely created a lot of hype around the show.
All right, guys, so I just want to address this Blessing and Nick situation just real quick. It was fun while it lasted, but I'm a pro bodybuilder. I hold myself and my sponsors to a much higher standard than this. So from here on out, you will not hear anything come out of my mouth about Blessing.
Obviously, on show day it was not close, but that feud, that hype, generated a lot more interest in the show, which got a lot more people talking about Nick Walker after that. And considering Blessing just massively improved and won the New York Pro himself, it's going to be a battle between these two at the Olympia, and I absolutely cannot wait to see it. The 2021 New York Pro wasn't just Nick Walker's career-defining moment, but it would set the stage for the meteoric rise of his star in bodybuilding, a star that will undoubtedly continue to shine bright. If you like this video, consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content like this, definitely subscribe and hit that notification button so you know exactly when I drop my next video. I'm Large Kofi. Thank you for watching.